Ladies and gentlemen, Trump got the most monumental victory any candidate could ask for regarding the Supreme Court. I have been telling you that Trump was going to get a huge, historic, constitutional victory over a very unconstitutional special counsel. You cannot indict and imprison a president over a speech or speaking to allies or political party officials. That is not a private act. That is these are legal activities protected by the Constitution. You can't then say, oh, he tried to deceive the country. You could level the 18 U.S. Code 371 charge, defrauding the U.S., against anyone, especially Democrats, who tried to convince people that Trump was a Kremlin operative. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. This is a huge, huge victory. I want you to listen to President Trump first, then we'll get to the enormous, enormous victory regarding presidential immunity. And in about a couple seconds, we'll get there. Just a momentary, a momentary. Hold on one second. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. The computer is acting up, and I don't know why. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's continue. This is President Trump. I apologize. My bad.
Thank you very much. So we begin again. This is a case that should never have been brought. Every single major legal scholar, Jonathan Turley, Greg Jarrett, Andy McCarthy, Dershowitz, every single scholar, Mark Levin, the great Mark Levin, had a whole show on it last night, said that this is a disgraceful case. It's a disgrace to the New York state and city court system. And all of the cases are, frankly, all of them are. You probably saw last night that Jack Smith got caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It was released late last night, and it's a big story. The documents case is a hoax created by them for election interference purposes. And so that one looks like it's going asunder. A brilliant judge saw some facts, and I haven't read what was revealed yet. It just came out. But the document hoax is indeed a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax. All of them are hoaxes, including the civil cases. They're controlled by the White House. They're controlled by Democrat judges and prosecutors that were put there specifically. They hate Trump. And the people are getting it. That's why we just came out. A new Emerson poll just was released about 2 minutes ago. And I'm leading by a lot in every swing state and leading in the general election. And you saw the CNN poll. I'm sure they aren't too happy with it, but the CNN poll was fantastic. So we're here. This is a hoax. This is a judge who's conflicted, badly, badly, badly conflicted. I've never seen a judge so conflicted, and giving us virtually no rulings. I hear I'm not even allowed to say advice of counsel. This is a new one to me, advice of counsel. When you have a lawyer and the lawyer does something or advises you on something, you say advice of counsel. He said you're not allowed to say that. And so you'll all figure it out. But I think the public has figured it out because the poll numbers are the highest they've ever been. And I appreciate you've treated me, actually, I thought quite fairly, at least the people here, which is a lot of people. And I appreciate that. The Biden protests that are going on are horrible. It's all caused by him, because he doesn't know how to speak. He can't put two sentences together. He's got to get out and make a statement, because the colleges are being overrun in this country. The anti-Semitism, all of the problems going on, they're being overrun. I've never seen anything like it. He said he ran because of Charlottesville. Well, if the people that know Charlottesville, when you extend the statement, it's a big hoax what they say was said, and they understand that. And Charlottesville is peanuts compared to what you're looking at now.
Trump never said both sides. Literally never stated that within the context of what they accused him of saying. So he was talking about conservatives who wanted to keep Civil War statues up. He was not saying they were fine people who were 1930s and 1940s German wannabes. Okay? He literally condemned those people. And within the speech, he condemned those people. He said there are fine people on both sides regarding the left-leaning demonstrators and conservatives who wanted to keep statues up, not the 1930s and 1940s German wannabes who Trump literally condemned. The journalism behind that hoax was just a public relations campaign for the Democratic Party. It was the most atrocious, the most deceptive form of quote-unquote journalism, when the actual text of his speech reads that and you can see it, he did condemn numerous times the 1930s and 1940s Germans. He did not state that they were fine people.
This whole country is up in arms, breaking into colleges, knocking the hell out of Columbia University. I mean, they took over. I know the building very well. They took over a building. That is a big deal. And I wonder if what's going to happen to them will be anything comparable to what happened to J6, because they're doing a lot of destruction, a lot of damages, a lot of people getting hurt very badly. I wonder if that's going to be the same kind of treatment they gave J6. Let's see how that all works out. I think I can give you the answer right now. And that's why people have lost faith in our court system. So the Biden protests are a disaster, and he hasn't even made a statement because he's not capable of making a statement. I'm still waiting for him to debate. He said on the very lowly rated Howard Stern show, he said very strongly, I want to debate. Well, we haven't seen it, but we would love to debate anytime, and I think it's a good time.
By the way, I used to love Howard Stern. I used to drive to school and work listening to Howard Stern in the 90s, and unfortunately, he's a shell of his former self. Everything, it's almost as if people like Howard Stern, everything they do, like every second of the day, they're petrified that their old selves will be canceled, or that the words or the opinions or the viewpoint or the theater or the acting or whatever it is that Howard Stern brought to the table, which was monumental. I mean, he was at the forefront of free speech. Howard Stern was at the forefront. He was the tip of the spear when it came to free speech and expression. Okay, he was amazing. And it's just, and now he has become the establishment that he used to speak up against. But I think the reality is, people like Howard Stern know that if you play a radio clip or a television segment of these types of legendary individuals, it don't fly in this day and age. They would get canceled, and the mob on social media on the left would go after them. And so what they do is they then say, well, we're more of the elder statesman type of. So there's the elder statesman Howard Stern, which is firmly a part of the media establishment that he used to go up against. And then there's the Howard Stern that was not afraid of anything. So we have we have one legendary radio man in Howard Stern who used to be amazing, used to be at the forefront of free speech, and now the man is petrified. Absolutely, it's almost as if he's petrified that somebody on the left or in the mainstream will replay. It's almost as if he's scared 24/7 that somebody will replay 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, 30 radio segments that were absolutely hilarious and awesome and amusing, more amusing than anything you hear or watch today, from the 90s in his show. And if they replayed them today, it would be immediate cancellation in terms of the sensibilities of the morally superior liberal Democrats. And it's almost as if a person like it's more than just him. There's a whole bunch of people like this. But anyway, hit subscribe. Hit subscribe to this channel if you're new.
To have a debate, even though it's early, but 6 months is pretty close. November 5th is going to go down as the most important day in the history of our country, because we're going to turn our country around. Our country is going to hell. It's going to hell. It's very sad to see. But November 5th is going to be the most important day in the history of our country. So I'm going to go into this trial. I'm going to sit in a freezing cold ice box for 8 hours, 9 hours or so. They took me off the campaign trail, but the good news is my poll numbers are the highest they've ever been, so at least we're getting the word out. And everybody knows this trial is a scam. It's a scam. The judge should be recused, and he should recuse himself today. It's the most recusable judge I've been. It's called recusal abuse, and he should recuse himself today. And maybe he will. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll do the right thing. But really, more importantly than the recusal, he should terminate the case today. The judge should terminate the case because they have no case. As Jonathan Turley said, as all of them said, every single one of them, Dershowitz, McCarthy, everyone, Greg Jarrett, Mark Levin, they all said this case should be ended immediately. This case is over. It should be ended immediately.
Henry, thank you so very much. HA, what in your opinion, what happened to Cheney, Kinzinger, and Thompson? I think Henry, and thank you for the support on the channel. I think that nothing. They'll probably have book deals that maybe they already do. Who knows? They might sell 1 or 2 copies, or maybe 20 or 30 copies. They might get a consulting or lobbying job, or public relations, or some type of archaic, never a Trump organization that's limping along and trying desperately to be relevant in the future. The January committee was full of lies, deception. They withheld exculpatory evidence in the form of video footage that Carlson showed the world. People were acquitted because of the video footage the January committee withheld. They literally took out portions of Trump's speech where he told people to go peacefully. And then the argument was, well, he only said peaceful once. Like, so what? That's enough. But Henry, to answer your question, there's no legal. Here's the issue. Trump has to be better at the same lawfare they level at him. There is no legal recourse, or there's no, Democrats can lie with impunity. And then they accuse Trump of lying when in reality he doesn't. Trump engages in hyperbolic speech sometimes, but it's always about a great economy or a great deal. It's never an outright lie. If you were to ask a liberal Democrat or a progressive, what did Trump lie about? They will literally make things up. Oh, he lied about, his last year in office. No, he didn't. He said the same things that Pelosi and Cuomo and others said. He didn't lie about anything. What did the man lie about? Conversely, they lied all for years about him being a Kremlin operative. But to answer your question, Henry, I don't think anything will happen in terms of repercussions legally. I think that they'll get maybe book deals, maybe they'll try to monetize or make it lucrative as being a critic of Trump, which will unfortunately be a lucrative venture for the next 4 years. He'll win, but see, again, Democrats don't care about the future of the country. They care about their ideology. Categorically and objectively, the economy and foreign policy have been an unmitigated disaster with Biden. But Democrats don't see it that way because their ideology is in play, which, by the way, changes all the time. They don't really have a set ideology. Just it's altered all the time.
And many of them are not fans of mine, but they want to do the right thing for the country. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go into the icebox now and sit for about 8 hours or 9 hours. I'd much rather be in Georgia. I'd much rather be in Florida. I'd much rather be in states that are in play, states that, I'd like to be able to campaign. Biden's out campaigning. You can call it campaigning. He can't campaign because every time he opens his mouth, he gets in trouble. But Biden is out campaigning very nicely. I think when I start campaigning, he'll stop. He'll go back into his basement. But I want to thank everybody. You've really been treating me very fair. I want to thank Time Magazine. They did a cover story, which is very nice. And it's actually, there's at least 60%, it's at least 60% correct, which is about all I can ask for. So I want to thank you, everybody. Thank you. Are you going to part of that?
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a huge victory. Even keeping Trump in court is a victory for Trump because it gives him a certain amount of discipline, okay? And it only makes him more attractive to people. His poll numbers are going up because he's seen as the victim by over half of the country here. But this is really, really interesting. Legal scholar John Woo on us crossing a Rubicon and these prosecutions being purely politically motivated.
Every respect, no?
Mark, I think you nailed it in your monologue. I'm so glad you brought that out because everyone, of course, is talking about the Supreme Court and what are they going to be doing about immunity. The Supreme Court has never had to hear a case like this because no president in the history of the republic has tried to prosecute one of his predecessors. That is crossing a Rubicon, and it creates a terrible incentive for future presidents because now they always have to be worried. They always have to be looking over their shoulder that some president in the future is going to go after them. So what you have here is the absence of statesmanship, leadership, common sense. There are no doubt presidents in the past who might have done things that other people might have thought had been criminal, but future presidents always thought it's in the best interest of our country to pardon a Nixon, to get past controversies and look to the future and do what's best for the American people. Unfortunately, it's Joe Biden who has triggered this constitutional crisis by continuing to press this special counsel investigation. And that's where the fault really lies in all of this.
And John, I'm listening to some of these justices, and they have been sucked into this world. I mean, I'm listening to Barrett. Is that private conduct? Is that official conduct? I mean, do they actually think these 9 justices are going to sit there and come up with a meaningful definition to apply in all circumstances when a president is sitting there under God knows what conditions, making decisions, having to make decisions and wonder? And I heard Judge Jackson say, but they have all the lawyers and what are they going to have? Criminal defense lawyers sitting around them on determining whether they're going to hit this place or hit that place or make these decisions. They're buying into this whole thing because it's Donald Trump. What is the potential, truly, for doing permanent damage to separation of powers, the power of the presidency, and empowering future administrations to go after past administrations like they do in these fascist and Marxist regimes?
If Donald Trump wins this case, it will be because of that exact point. It's because let's just stop and talk about the future, because that's what's important. And the question is, what is this going to do to presidents when they have to make the hardest decisions for the country? We want them to think about, oh, is my successor or my political opponent in the next election, who's already going to get the nomination from his party, are they going to turn the power of the government against me? What we'll end up doing is we'll have presidents who won't want to exercise any leadership. They won't take any risks. They won't make the tough calls because they're going to be worried that some successor there is going to want to throw them in jail. And isn't that?
Hey, Sean Hannity.
So that was a huge consideration of the Supreme Court. They know very well that this is crossing a Rubicon. This is opening up the floodgates. This is opening up a can of worms, a Pandora's box, however you want to describe it. Democrats have convinced themselves this is about the rule of law. It obviously is not. That's why they waited to 2024. Okay, the entire planet sees what's going on. And they see, here's the issue. They needed to make everything morally relative. For years, both Clintons were embroiled in potential criminal activity, okay, regarding foundation donations, private servers. Then you had Joe and Hunter with a laptop that could have been even worse than anything the Clintons did. And so how do they make everything morally relative? Well, media is now firmly an extension of the Democratic Party. There are no Trump supporters at the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Atlantic. I mean, all of these publications are just basically DNC newsletters. And so there are no investigative journalists at these publications investigating Democrats, or I should say Biden or Hunter or Hillary or Bill or anybody that is powerful within the Democratic Party. They're only investigating Trump. Okay, so you have Hollywood, media, you have, they're very good at lawfare. They're very good at manipulating bureaucracies, Democrats. They're brilliant. They're masters at manipulating bureaucracies. And so they leveled a special counsel, and all of these indictments against Trump, hundreds of years in prison he faces. Could you imagine? And not even 1 second in jail or prison will he get, because it's all nonsense. Now, he might very well be convicted in New York, but that will only make him even more popular among Americans who know what's really going on. Okay, these are Democrats in New York, Democrats within the special counsel, Democrats going after Trump. They would say that Trump was a tyrant, a despot, a totalitarian, and authoritarian. Okay? If he did to them what they're doing to him. So, check this out. This is Matthew Whitaker, former Attorney General.
Whitaker joins me now. Matt, thanks for being here. I first want to take us back to what happened with Donald Trump today, because he's facing in New York this gag order. We don't know exactly how the judge is going to rule on whether he's violating it or not. But could what we saw this morning, Trump going out and campaigning, be considered something that he shouldn't be doing with a gag order? And if so, isn't that direct election interference with his campaigning for the presidency?
Yes, it would be, David. Good to be with you. I think the judge is going to be more focused on what he's sending out on Truth Social about witnesses, especially. I don't think, he is certainly entitled to campaign, and he is certainly entitled to do it outside of court hours on Wednesdays and on weekends. But that being said, we are very close. If this court muzzles him from doing anything outside of court, then I think that is clear election interference. Yeah. But this whole thing, as you know, is election interference because it's keeping him off the campaign trail.
It is indeed. And I just wonder what's going to happen about his decision to appear as a witness. A lot of lawyers are saying, look, let the court hang itself on this case because they've been making so many mistakes.
Trump will not be a witness. I think that that's more theater. He categorically should not be a witness. I know that, there are a lot of wonderful, amazing people. I love Trump, but who think that he didn't have a relationship with Stormy. He almost certainly did. He did. Okay, you don't just pay $130,000 for no reason, and you get somebody sign an NDA. But again, that was not a campaign finance issue. It is what it is. His family loves him. His wife loves him. His kids love him. He's a great father, great grandfather. You look at how successful his children are. and you compare that with the families of top Democrats, okay, I'm not going to focus on Hunter or anything. I'm just saying, you don't see the same problems. You don't see the same problems in Trump's family. And it's like Trump was probably a better father. Even Hillary Clinton said he was a very good father than a lot of top Democrats were. But anyway, maybe even our current president, very likely. But anyway, he should not testify, for the love of God, and he won't. I know he won't.
This court in New York. What do you think? Should he avoid becoming a witness and give them any kind of information they could use against him?
Yeah, David, I've tried cases both as a prosecutor and a defense lawyer. You don't make that decision until the end to see how the evidence comes in, how you feel it's going with the jury, the read you get on the jury. So it's premature to say that. I like his attitude that he's unafraid to take the stand, but he might not have to because the case is so weak.
All right. Let's move to the immunity case. This is really a big one because it could affect Jack Smith and whether he gets a trial before the election or not. It's looking at whether Trump, as president, had immunity to do what he did after the election, specifically January 6th, but all the stuff leading up to that, and did that, and I'm going to use a complicated phrase here from an old Supreme Court decision dealing with Richard Nixon, did that fall, quote, within the parameter of his duties? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think what he did is most likely did fall within his duties. But the challenge that the Supreme Court's going to have today is there's been no fact finding. So other than the papers that have, sort of been alleged, the court has no facts. The trial court has no facts. And so I think one of the most likely outcomes is the Supreme Court sends this back to Judge Chutkan to try to get some factual basis so they can make this decision. But that Nixon case, there's a Clinton case, but there's no criminal extent of this case. And one thing I would point, David, remember the hullabaloo around if he ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political opponent? That's not the hypothetical they're going to hear today. They're going to say, what if he orders SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a terrorist? Can he be held liable in the court of international criminal? And so that's a more interesting scenario. And that's why I think he's going to get a lot of benefit of the doubt on the immunity question. Right.
By the way, Trump lawyers didn't bring that up. It was the judge who, with a very hypothetical case. And the answer was not as the media responded. The answer was very carefully.
The indictment, what they're leveling against Trump is not him ordering an illegal act to end someone's life. That would categorically be a crime. They're saying that he deceived the American public, and the average American was a victim here, and the rule of law, and he tried to impede and obstruct an official proceeding. He did none of these things. They're just accusing him, and then they say, well, we're accusing him, and we have a right to do so, and we did it legally, and we indicted him, there's a grand jury, and it is what it is, and just deal with it. And you can level that broad, ambiguous 18 U.S. Code 371 statute. It's basically saying you did a bunch of legal, above board, normally appropriate acts in a malicious and deceptive manner. So therefore, we're going to imprison you. That's all they're doing. So then they say, well, our indictment is just like if Trump tried to sell the planet to Martians. It's like, no, that would be an obvious crime, or a burglary. Watergate burglary was a crime. A speech was not a crime. Nothing Trump did was an actual crime.
Phrase, but very quickly, if the Supreme Court sends it back to the courts, does that delay this trial until after the election?
Yeah, I think there's little likelihood at this point that this case or any of the other cases, except for the current trial, are going to, make this November deadline. But that being said, Jack Smith really wants to try this case before the election. Yeah.
That absolutely will not happen. And the Chief Justice, if you have Chief Justice Roberts on board, you have all the 5 other conservatives. So it'll be probably 6-3, maybe even 7-2. But listen to this.
So the Court of Appeals below, whose decision we're reviewing, said quote, a former president can be prosecuted for his official acts because the fact of the prosecution means that the former president has allegedly acted in defiance of the laws. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, I think it sounds tautologically true, but I want to underscore that the obligation of a president is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed.
Well, I think it sounds tautologically true as well, and that, I think, is the clearest statement of the court's holding, which is why it concerns me. As I read it, it says simply, a former president can be prosecuted because he's being prosecuted.
Well, I would not suggest.
That was the end of the special counsel case forever, when Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice, stated that. He called out the lower courts that are obviously, just like the Colorado Supreme Court, which was overturned 9-0, even the liberal justices, you can't just accuse Trump of criminal activity and say, well, we accused him because we have enough evidence to accuse him. You could do that with anyone. He had to, as president, he had to have committed an actual crime that most Americans can explain, like the bribery and graft that potentially our current president engaged in with a laptop. Okay, you can't just say, oh, Trump did this, let's imprison him. He's a president. He has the power to declassify almost anything. And most American citizens don't have that power or authority. He's commander-in-chief. He can send Americans anywhere in the world. And then when the special counsel and Democrats say he's just like the average American, no, he's not. Can you do that? Are you commander-in-chief? No, I'm not. So you are protected. Then they say immunity. This is the hilarious. Immunity isn't even in the Constitution. Neither is the FBI, genius. Neither is the Department of Energy. Okay. So suddenly they look at the text and they become Antonin Scalia when it suits them. It's not in here. Yeah, well, Supreme Court precedent, Nixon versus v. Fitzgerald and other Supreme Court precedents state that the president is protected. He has a certain level of protection. He has a great amount of protection and authority. He can wage wars that are devastating. He could do what President Obama did and completely destabilize an entire region by intervening in Libya and destroying that country with an intervention. Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld, I mean, there's a litany of international laws they potentially broke. So, you could do that with any president. You could say, oh, well, he wasn't really working on behalf of the country. He's working on his own behalf. You could do that with anyone. So, you think when Biden was in front of a red background speaking about how evil Trump is, you think that was for personal or public gain? You think that was for the Constitution and for the Republic and for the country? No. He was doing it only for the Democratic Party. People, suddenly, the morally superior liberal Democrats become so naive and so idealistic and naive when it suits them. Oh, there's public and private acts. So everything Biden does, everything Obama did was for the good of the country? Probably not.
That's either the proper approach in this case or certainly not the government's approach. A prosecution does, of course, invoke federal criminal law. The allegations have to be presented to a grand jury, which votes upon the indictment.
Well, that's what I mean, shortly after that statement in the court's opinion, that's what they said. But there's no reason to worry because the prosecutor will act in good faith, and there's no reason to worry because a grand jury will have returned the indictment. Now, you know how easy it is in many cases for a prosecutor to get a grand jury to bring an indictment, and reliance on the good faith of the prosecutor may not be enough in some cases. I'm not suggesting here. So if it's tautological, and those are the only protections that the Court of Appeals below gave, and that is no longer your position, you're not defending that position, why shouldn't we either send it back to the Court of Appeals or issue an opinion making clear that that's not the law.
Well, I am defending the Court of Appeals judgment, and I do think that there are layered safeguards that the court can take into account that will ameliorate concerns about unduly chilling presidential conduct. That concerns us. We are not endorsing a regime that we think would expose former presidents to criminal prosecution in bad faith, for political animus, without adequate evidence.
You're never going to be able to prove bad faith. Even the Democrats believe that the prosecution in New York and the hush money is in good faith, and that it's purely about the rule of law. So they can say Trump's a convict and he's a felon, and they can say he broke it's the rule of law. And meanwhile, these are only Democrats with potentially, potential donations to the Democratic Party. It's in New York. It's like unbelievable. It's purely political. How can you prove bad faith? How can you prove that? I mean, the Supreme Court overturns corruption convictions. They did so with Jack Smith's conviction of Bob McDonnell. But it takes a long time to prove that. Initially, media, Democrats, the court system works. In the manner that you get a prosecutor. You get for example, an attorney general or district attorney. They get prosecutors to go after somebody like Trump. They find something, anything, even though it's nonsense, and then they try to imprison the man. And only after years of appeal is the person potentially victorious. But in the meanwhile, it was purely political and partisan. So how can you prove initially that it's all good faith? You can't. You have to have an actual crime that he committed, which he didn't commit a crime. They're trying to say he intentionally deceived people. He did nothing of the sort.
A politically driven prosecution would violate the Constitution under Waite versus United States. It's not something within the arsenal of prosecutors to do. Prosecutors take an oath. The Attorney General takes an oath. So I don't want to overstate Your Honor's concern with potentially relying solely on good faith. But that's an ingredient, and then the courts stand ready to adjudicate motions based on selective prosecution, political animus. This court relied on those very protections in the Vance case just 2 years ago.
But what concerns me is, as you know, the Court of Appeals did not get into a focused consideration of what acts we're talking about or what documents we're talking about because of its adoption of what you termed, and I agree quite correctly, as a tautological statement, because the fact of prosecution was enough to take away any official immunity. The fact of prosecution, they had no need to look at what courts normally look at when you're talking about a privilege or immunity question.
Well, I think I would take issue, Mr. Chief Justice, with the idea of taking away immunity. There is no immunity that is in the Constitution unless this court creates it today. There certainly is no textual immunity. We do not submit that that's the end of the story. United States versus Nixon wasn't a textually based case. Neither was Nixon versus Fitzgerald. We endorse both.
But it does say he's commander-in-chief. It does say he's commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So there's inherent within that sentence is a good deal of protection and immunity.
Of those holdings. But what is important is that no public official has ever had the kind of absolute criminal immunity that my friend speaks of, even with respect to the speech or debate clause. It's very narrow. It's focused on legislative acts. It's not focused on everything that a congressman does. And it responds to a very specific historical circumstance that basically involved the two other branches potentially harassing legislators and preventing them from doing their jobs. That's why it ended up in the Constitution. Nothing like that ended up in the Constitution for the presidents. And that's because one of the chief concerns of the framers was the risk of presidential misconduct. They labored over this. They adopted an impeachment structure that separated removal from office as a political remedy from criminal prosecution. This departed from the British model. The British model was you get impeached
and that's exactly why the Supreme Court, the Colorado Supreme Court case was overturned unanimously. When the lawyers for the Colorado Supreme Court or for the special counsel go into these long-winded historical accounts, the justices, all of them, all 9 of them, they know more about history, the history of the country, than any prosecutor. So it's like they know what the framers wanted a lot more than the prosecutors, who have political ambitions and are, in this case, going after Trump. So they don't need a lecture on history. And once they start hearing this lecture on history, they probably tune out and they say, yeah, we're gonna vote against you. But anyway, Politico, Jack Smith's odds of putting Trump on trial this year are sinking. Yeah, I told you this, ladies and gentlemen. It ain't going to happen this year. But anyway, hit subscribe, and he's going to dissolve the special counsel. He'll win. Could be a landslide victory. He'll win, ladies and gentlemen. Trump will win. This is a huge victory for Trump, and it's going to catapult him to the Oval Office, his second term. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe. Thanks, everybody, to my super chat. Thank you.